By my watch, it's noon. Today is Monday, February 5, 2018. We are in the City Hall Council chambers, and it's time for a special meeting to discuss the budget today. To the public, we give notice that we welcome comment, but we ask that you give your name and address at the microphone and limit the time to about 3 minutes so others may speak. Those who are able, please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
can we see if we can turn the mics up? We can just barely hear you. It isn't coming through.
Okay.
That's,
Is that better?
you gotta get real close then.
You know, the problem is this only comes this far.
Yeah.
It doesn't, this cord isn't as long as the one over there. Okay, let's call the roll.
Cahill,
Here.
Gowdy,
Here.
Hoop,
Here.
Lamer,
Here,
Martin,
Here.
Weirin.
Here.
Thank you. Are there any comments by the councilors or city administrator?
Your Honor, I do have one, and I am not sure where this needs to go, so this may not be the appropriate spot, but I hope that you will grant me some latitude due to my newness here. Would like, as we talk about the budgeting program today, I received emails and have seen in the paper some information from concerning the E911 system and the tax collection. Could we have the finance department explain that to me a little bit more about a citizen, Mr. Riskadal, has said that it's a deficit and we're not treating it as such. And so could I get some explanation on that at the appropriate point during the meeting today?
I would imagine that's fair game for discussion when we're on the budget things.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Any other councilor comments? Okay, hearing none. Let's move on to the discussion, and this is the four-year 2019 budget. Diana.
I think I'm actually going to kick it off. There's been some changes over the weekend that we need to talk about. You'll recall at our last meeting, we were talking about a $15,000 deficit in the general fund, which we removed a contract that we had proposed for next year to eliminate that deficit. And then over the weekend, through looking at the employee benefits transfers, which we transfer in tax dollars from a separate fund into the general fund for employee benefits, there were some things that were under budgeted and over budgeted, and we have a new deficit of $34,679 in addition to what we talked about previously. So that's where we stand today. At this point, I think what one thing that I would recommend is that we not fund the police and fire positions that we move forward with, including to be supported by local option sales tax at the last meeting. You know, in total, this is a $50,000 budget that we would then be adding additional personnel expenses onto, and I don't think that that's the right time. Now's not the right time to do that. What I would ask is if we can fill this nearly $35,000 gap with local option sales tax at this point, knowing that we will probably have a conversation with you about backfill in the near future, and then we can come back when it's that backfill discussion with some proposals for reducing expenditures and or increasing some of our fees and charges in the general fund.
may I comment, please? You provided us with these two sheets of estimated balances as of the end of the fiscal year this year. How much of those balances were used in the new budget? Did you use all those balances up? Did you try to maintain them? There's some pretty good sizable numbers in there that we wouldn't, that I don't know why we've got a balance in that account to start with. I don't know why they're there, but there's a lot of money in those balances at the end of the year, and I'm just wanting to know if those are all committed funds or if they're open to be used.
Can you get more specific about which funds you might be talking about? It's hard to answer that question without knowing that.
Well, here's 2 pages, and there's only on the first page, there's only like 5 items that doesn't have a balance. The tax instrument financing has a balance of almost $500,000 in it. The city torque liability says there's $81,000 balance there. That's a lot of money. That's $600,000 there that's in a balance. That, did you use it in next year's budget, or is it just going to lay there?
I think the simple answer to your question is those are both restricted funds. There is work that we need to do with the county auditor's office to true up our TIF indebtedness. That was something that, because of the size and scope of that project and knowing that it was starting, that came up around budget time, right at the start of budget. Diana and I had worked together to basically say, let's put that until after budget. So we will be looking at that. And then the city tort liability, that comes from a separate tax levy where it's basically some of our insurance as we go through the year and have deductibles that we have to pay. That's where that comes out of as well. So having a fund balance there is a good thing. So this is a list that Diana, do you want to speak more to how you use this in the budget process?
Right, so in the column second from the last one where it says net budget,
Yes.
that's going to tell you whether our revenues,
Whether you used them or not?
whether our expenses are in excess of
Gotcha.
our revenues or not.
Gotcha.
So the funds that start at 100 are all special revenue funds, which means they have a restriction on them.
Okay.
So, timing wise, like a grant, you could get the money up front and then spend it in a different fiscal year, or you could be spending it and getting reimbursed. So it crosses fiscal years.
Okay.
The TIF, we provided you the certification at the end of November, what we were going to certify with the county and what we were going to pay out for the different companies. So that's why that has a big balance. But yes, probably next November, we will not claim all we can just to bring that balance down.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense.
But I provided you this cash sheet so you could see in some situations why the expenses were exceeding the revenues for the
Okay.
fiscal year 19. Even though
Okay.
we were using the cash balance.
Okay. Thanks.
I was going to say, and also might now be the time to address your question, Councilmember Cahill, about the 911 funding and why we're still talking about a deficit. And I guess the simple explanation is that communications has always been part of the general fund. The general fund, which we're talking about, is just that big bucket where we have a lot of our functions and services budgeted through. So we look at that as one big pile of money. One big pile of expenditures as well that draws off of that revenue. And so when anything changes in there, whether it's, eliminating a department or a function, or whether it's, we're looking at a revenue change with backfill or other things, it's all happening within the confines of that larger pot of money. Those things are all budgeted individually as different functions, which you've seen in your budget reports that come out, that we are, categorizing those as different functions to provide you the detail, to also give the departments the ability to know what their individual budgets are. But it's all part of this larger fund where any individual change in any individual function has a greater impact on the whole. The $8.10 tax levy is our basic operating levy. We've gone through, and Diana will go through, some of the other levies that we are talking about levying, where if we don't levy that full 810, then it reduces or eliminates our ability to levy any of those other levies. And so what we have proposed to you here, and what we have been talking about throughout this budget season, is to not touch the operating revenue. We clearly still need the operating revenue because in total we're about a $50,000 deficit, even with what I would call a fairly large expenditure reduction in the general fund for this next fiscal year. What we are proposing to do is that we can control the tax levy by applying local option sales tax fund balance to some of those areas where we don't need to levy as much. And so that's one of the ways that we are proposing to go about it, to keep the operating levy where it is, because we still need that operating revenue. We still have a deficit that we have to take care of. But to adjust off of other levies, I think specifically the debt service levy, I believe, is where we're adjusting off of, so that you can clearly see where tax savings are being applied. So I don't know if that's as clear as mud. Or,
Thank you.
okay.
Okay, so last meeting, we brought forth to you our levy, and you said that you wanted to keep the same. So this column is exactly what you were handed out last time. With our new amounts that we discovered needed to be corrected, we kept the levy the same, but the dollar amount coming out of the property tax relief fund balance has changed. So it has actually increased. So I put that number down here. So you can see that our fund balance at 6/30/18 is projected to be $1.2 million. We're going to get $2.4 million in from local option sales tax, the 78%, and that automatically goes to debt relief. And then we're going to use the other $633,000 to make the levy to keep the levy the same.
Can you tell us what page you're on?
I was going to say, can you zoom in on that? It's
I
done.
can't read it from here. Sorry.
Where's
I
the-
can't either.
And is this in last week's packet? Or do we have another copy of it today?
You do not have another copy of it, yeah.
So it was in last week's?
Yeah. It said 14 of 32 in last week's.
So what Diana's trying to show is that the numbers have changed a little bit between the tax levies and where we're buying things down at. As I mentioned, we were messing with the employee benefits tax levy, but we're still showing it at $15.28, which is where we talked about being at the end of last week's meeting. Can you speak in? Bethany's having a hard time hearing you.
Okay. And then the middle column, the loss council designated, since we did discover an error, we did want to correct that by using that money. So you can see that 35,000. You can see the $35,000 council designated coming off of that balance.
35,000 goes in there.
So other transactions that may happen, we talked about before, would be the cash reserve amount, and any proposals that you're willing to pass today from the different organizations, which is later on in the agenda. So that's just a way of tracking those amounts. If you wanted to add more in here, then you can see the ending balance.
763.
So, any questions on our review? Go on. Okay. So the next item, we're going to be talking about those special revenue funds. And I kind of, in my memo, I showed you, or I told you what they are, what the different funds mean. I do want to bring to your attention that Fund 179 is new. We got a grant from Martha Ellen Ty, the neighborhood housing grant, and our lead grant is discontinued as of 12/31/17. We will be applying again, but at this point, we do not have the funding for that. One of the bigger grants is our Section 8 housing program grant, is $1.4 million in revenue. And then Fund 190 is the 911 surcharge, which we will no longer be budgeting after this fiscal year. Do you have any questions on any specific fund in the special revenues?
Let's continue.
Okay. The next section is the capital projects funds. So these funds all start with 300. Trying to find the page number. Oh. So, Fund 300 is the amount of levy for the property, or for the capital projects. So this kind of relates back to here. So we levy the full amount, the 67.5 cents per thousand. This money comes into Fund 300, and then as we spend it out of Fund 30 or 32, we transfer the money. So in a lot of cases, the levy amounts are in the special revenue funds. And then we transfer it back to the general fund. Do you have the page number, Jessica? For the,
40
Yep.
and 41.
I was going to say
Okay.
40, 43 is Fund 300.
okay.
Yes.
So the other 300 accounts are construction projects, such as streets, airports, parks, Trees Forever project, the police and fire station. We use this when we're spending money for bonds, any bond projects or TIF projects. So are there any questions on that series of funds, the capital funds?
Hearing none, let's go on to the enterprise funds.
Okay. The enterprise funds is on page 61, starting with my memo. These are our enterprise funds, so that means they're supposed to be run like a business. So we collect fees from the citizens based on what they're using, such as sewer and water. Of course, people that ride the bus pay a fee, composting and the aquatic center concessions. So when we were doing the transit fund, we basically have not increased the levy very much over the last several years. And if you look at the cash sheet, you'll see that there's a 50,000 ending balance. We're getting that through the levy. So we increased the levy for public transportation by 50,000 because we feel like there should be some kind of balance left in case there's an emergency. Buses are very expensive to repair. The aquatic center concessions also is in a deficit. They'll be reviewing their prices this summer when they reopen. Is there any questions on this series of funds?
As I understand it, most aquatic centers have that same problem around the state.
Correct.
Any questions? If not, let's move on to console electronic devices.
At a prior meeting, you had requested how much it would cost for the council members and the mayor to have electronic devices. The Surface Pro purchase would be between $9,600 and $12,000. If you'd prefer a laptop instead, that would be $8,000. And then you need to buy the license, which is between, well, if you purchase it outright, it's $2,392. If you just pay month by month, then it's $1,247 annually, or $104 a month.
Or page 84 in the packet.
Yes.
I know two of us have expressed a desire not to let loose our devices that we already have, so I think we would be looking at only getting 5 or 6 devices, not 8.
Do you have a preference of Surface Pro or laptop?
I've had both. I really didn't get along well with the Surface Pro, so I gave it away to a charity for an auction. And that's why I got the laptop, but that's just my own personal experience.
I was gonna say I can speak. I don't have it here today, but I do have a Surface Pro, and it has been very handy with the changes that we've made in the council packets. I'm able to save them as a PDF and then pull them up, and then I can basically write all my notes from the meeting onto the PDF version of the packet, and then save that there versus keeping all sorts of paperwork. So that would be my one in favor, is the ability to write on things. It really can, if you're trying to get paper free, get you to paper free.
I have to admit, I do keep touching the screen, which doesn't do any good on a Mac. But I hit 65. I turned eligible for Medicare in 2 weeks, and so I'm an old dog and like the laptop.
Michelle Sponheimer, Housing Community Development. I would request, I guess, if you're considering devices, that you do fulfill for the full amount. For like Planning Commission can use those devices then, or Board of Adjustment. It would be really nice to be able to have that for any boards that are meeting here, and so not just basing it based on maybe who has individual things, but as a whole for our council activity. Just a request.
Thank you. Any discussion?
That was a question that I did have, was whether they would be here as for use only here, or to use at home to read the packets and make informational questions and things there to bring in to have that.
That's your decision.
And that would just be one. To have it here is one thing, but probably in my mind, if we decide to go that way, that my bigger need, or I make my notes and things on my device at home when I'm first looking through the packets, and when I encounter questions that I have, not necessarily when I sit down here.
That's basically one of the biggest reasons I brought this up is because I'd heard that we were going paperless. I felt that if we were going to do that, this is the next step. With our new website, it makes it a lot easier. I do have another one at home that's a touchscreen with Cami on it, an app on it that you can write on it, and it will save it. You can underline. The question I'd have with not being mobile is, I think the council, once we get this set up, we would have a portal to go to the finances. And I don't know if that's going to be a setup through a password. If we left them here, I don't think we'd want it open to other entities. But that being said, it's just one of this. It's a one-time shot. So until you get to the point of upgrading in, say, 4 years or 5 years, but with this new web page and stuff, it's a lot easier to make notes and keep up with Diana as she goes through the finances. Sometimes she gets going pretty fast, and the Cami, I noticed, is about 10 seconds slower than Diana is, so it takes a little while to load up. And I do know there's new devices out there that are instant, and it's just, when I brought it up, I just thought this was the way to go. Get us kind of up to speed and make it a little easier. And I don't know the price tag on the paper that we use as a city, but I guarantee it's a whole lot more than we're going to spend for these.
I was going to echo what Councilmember Gowdy said. I mean, I think we've seen, we didn't quite know how the new website would function with the agenda center and everything, but it seems to be functioning pretty well. And I want to say that we have 4 of 7 that are here right now that have already kind of moved to paperless, where we're still printing a packet for some, but they're not taking it, they're, looking at it online. And so if there is a way to get towards paperless, I had often made the comment that no one would be able to pry out that paper agenda out of my hands. And I have also made the transition as well. So Sherry's not printing the whole packet for me, usually just printing the agenda. So that's where we'd like to go, but only we'll do whatever your comfort level allows.
Your Honor, I like the idea, and I think they need to be mobile. I'm hoping that you've put into the cost of the operation a separate governmental email address for each one of us, so that we can get our emails that is involved with the city on that particular device, and that way it takes it off of all our personal stuff, so our personal computers are no longer available in case we get an audit. That all the governmental stuff will be on those, and to be able to get those emails and stuff, they have to be mobile. You have to be able to take them with you. I think they should be assigned to you when you come on the council, and it's up to you to make sure it is taken care of.
Good
Yes,
points.
that's something that we've discussed, was council member email addresses that are city issued.
Yes.
So, and that would be the perfect time to make that transition.
Yes.
I'll reverse myself. If we're going to use the device that way, I think I probably need to learn another one. Is there a consensus that we ought to give this a try?
And this
Yep.
would be paid out of your local option
Can-
sales tax council designated funds?
Yes.
Yes.
Jessica, can you reiterate what seems to be the consensus?
It is a consensus that we'll go ahead and try these devices. I guess the one pending issue is whether you'd like to get one as well, Bethany.
I didn't hear all of that, sorry. I heard we're trying some devices.
I think the consensus was to go with, well, I guess we didn't ask whether we'd be looking at the Surface Pro or the laptops, but I guess I sense that the Surface Pro is probably winning out. And though I started by saying I didn't want one because I like my Mac too well, if we're going to have personal emails to it just related to the city, and if you're able to highlight the packets in advance on a Surface Pro, I think I'd like one myself. And I recommend you get one too, Bethany.
If I must, but is there, I heard, was it Michelle speak earlier and ask for these for some other boards? Is that what I heard?
It was. Michelle was suggesting like the planning and zoning or board of adjustment folks might be able to use any devices that our counselors don't use.
I think we ought to experiment with us, and then if that all works good, then we can move from there to all the rest of them too.
I like that idea. Okay.
Okay.
Let's go to number 6 then. And that is requests from organizations for the local option sales tax council designated funds.
Yes, so you have 22 different projects that organizations are submitting to you to be paid out of your local option sales tax council designated funds. You can use that for any public purpose. So rather than reading through the form, hopefully you've read through them prior to this meeting.
It's
Do you have
page
any
85 on the
questions?
packet.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Yes.
the list.
Page 85.
Okay.
I don't know if there's any organizations here to answer
We
questions.
weren't going to, I was going to say, I think I told people that there wasn't going to be presentations
Okay.
here today.
Your Honor, I have
May I
some,
speak, Your Honor?
go ahead.
Councilor Warren.
Okay, sorry. Did I interrupt,
Yes.
Diana?
No, somebody else, but go ahead.
Okay, sorry. And I apologize for being on the phone for this, but I felt it was really important. I just want the council to remember what we're here for. As council members, we are to provide for essential city services. And any dollars we spend on other things are not available for street improvements, property tax relief, paying down debt, police and fire personnel, and all of those things. So I think we really need to focus on our essential city services and make sure that we're taking care of essential city functions first. And I think that these things need to be budgeted, and then we figure out how to pay for them. So I think part of the question for us as we look at future funding requests, not just today's, but future funding requests, is what are the trade-offs? Are we willing to say that this is more important than those things like street improvements? And then is there an actual official city purpose, an official city presence with those projects? So, for example, with the list before us, sister cities is directly related to our city. There is a city-to-city relationship that we're talking about there. Now, we have funded them in the past. We have not funded them more recently because of budget issues. We still have budget issues. And it's a very good, healthy economy right now, and it may not be so healthy down the road. So I'm really not interested in funding any of these requests. Even though most of them, not all of them, are very noble causes and important for our community, we need to take care of our essential city services. And I think what we can do for these organizations is publicize their requests, their projects, and help steer them toward the community foundation or many of the other foundations around town for funding. So that's where I'm coming from. If I had to move anything, I would move that we fund sister cities to the tune of $1,000, but it should go into our general fund budget, and then the funding we'll have to figure out, how we actually offset that cost. We'll have to figure out as a council, probably backfilling from the lost fund. So that's where I am.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Discussion.
Bethany, does that include, I heard you say sister cities. I don't know if I heard you say 4th of July fireworks or anything
I didn't.
or anything
I just said sister cities. The fireworks, I think we're going to have to just allow to keep fundraising and promote it around the community that they're raising money. But it's an after-hours sort of thing. If we have city personnel involved, it would be off-duty and probably unofficial. But with sister cities, that's a daytime thing. It's, they visit City Hall and they learn about what we do as a city and how we function. And I viewed it as more of where we have an official purpose and official presence.
Your Honor.
Yes.
Can I comment? I have a couple other comments I'd like to make. The 4th of July celebration, I think, should be funded. If we're not proud enough of our city to go out and help honor those people, I think that's getting pretty bad. So I'd like to see us funded at a rate higher than $3,000. So I thought we used to give $5,000, and so I'd like to see that increased, and I'd like to look at doing that. The Trees Forever program, we've done that with Alliant for years, and $100 isn't going to break us up, I don't think. And the final one is the security cameras on 13th Street. I guess I don't care about the outdoor speaker system, but we put security cameras downtown, and Jessica and I have had some conversation about this, and she thinks they probably should help support those cameras, but the ones we put downtown, we didn't ask the businesses downtown to support them and give the money to do it. So I would back off on that one if we have some kind of a guarantee that if we will revisit that item again. But I would move to amend Bethany's motion and add the fireworks and the Trees Forever to that at the rate. The fireworks, I'd like to see them at a rate of $5,000, and I'd like to see the Trees Forever the $100 they asked for.
It's been moved to amend the motion. Bethany, were you able to hear that well enough, or do I need to repeat it?
I think I heard fireworks, $5,000, Trees Forever, $1,000.
100.
100 for the Trees Forever.
Okay, so what they asked for. Okay.
Is there a second to the motion to amend?
I'll second.
I forget whether we have discussion on a motion to amend. I think we do. Is there any discussion?
Your Honor, I had a couple of concerns about this process, and I have to admit, again, I was not on board when the local option sales tax was passed, and so I was not part of the discussions of how the funds would be distributed. Some of the concerns that I have is that we as a city are asking for grant funds from different organizations, such as Martha Ellen Tide, to fund the study of the 3rd Avenue corridor, for Highway 14 corridor. We've asked, for several other things, and I find it difficult to rationalize then how we can be distributing money to open, as we did sort of put out an open forum to anyone who would like to be considered for this funding. Not only am I concerned about having any organization apply for funding, I feel that if we decide to distribute funding, we need a process that is systematic and objective, where we can view these the proposals that are forward and score them based on items such as the amount they request, the impact on the city, the number of people does it impact, what % of an organization's budget are we providing, how is that budget funded, through other grants or fundraising, what goal area is it for the city, is it an ongoing expense or a one-time expense, and if that truly is a item that will have benefits to our city and to the citizens at our city. So I think if we decide to go forward, I put forward, and when we get to the point, I'd like to put a motion that we develop an objective system to score the grants before we start handing money out, if we decide to hand money out.
I will have to admit, for the last 5 years, I've been the secretary of the Thai Foundation and the secretary of the Community Foundation, which does do that systematic scoring in the Community Foundation area. And then the Thai Foundation always knows what its major goals are when they look at grant applications like this, and they do require the same type of information that you're talking about. And so it has felt funny to me to think that we are getting into that foundation business as a city, but I don't have a vote anymore.
Well, I also feel that if I don't know anything about a project, if I was very familiar with a project, it might be my pet project that I would like to bring forward, and I think that we need to protect the city in not saying that we had favoritism or that we put forth things that just we wanted. I think we need to have a way to answer back to the people who submitted proposals to say this was why yours was funded, this was why it was not funded, and to have reasons for that. I think it's protection for the city so that we are not at risk of appearing subjective in distributing city funds.
Good points. Any
That's
other
right.
discussion? Was that Bethany?
Yes, I agreed with Sue. And that's where it comes back to where we have a process of looking at, just so that everybody's clear on the trade-offs, and also having these budget items come out of the staff, come from our staff saying, this is something that we should put in the budget and this is why. And otherwise, I don't really see the difference between us and the Community Foundation, and we should not be in that business. It's not our business. That's not what the voters voted for. It's not what I voted for.
Any other councilor comments before I invite the public comment?
Reed Riscadell, 1412 South Fifth Street. I echo the initial comments that was made earlier by Bethany. I can't imagine when we were voting on this particular portion of the Lost campaign is that we envisioned something such as this occurring. The city is not a foundation, and frankly, you're discussing exactly what that is. You're not to do that. It's to be done essential services, and I'm sorry if this is considered to be essential services. The rest of the people that voted on that Lost campaign have to have their heads spinning. Please do not vote yes on any of this.
Thank you for your input. Any other comment?
These two of these are already in the budget, correct?
No, none of these are in the budget.
The fireworks were in
None-
they were in last year's budget. I mean, they have been a budgeted item.
You took special action last year on the fireworks outside of the budget process. And that was local option sales tax fund balance that was used there. But no, none of these have been regularly budgeted items, either in this current fiscal year or were included in this next fiscal year and would be separate considerations.
Did I,
I think the Trees Forever, we got a line item budget for it, shows a balance in it, so I know it's been budgeted before.
Yeah, and I don't know if Diana, if you want to speak to the Trees Forever Fund, we do have a special revenue fund there that accounts for
Yeah.
our expenses related to Trees Forever activities, and I think some revenue there too.
Yeah, we actually apply for a grant for Trees Forever, and then those trees are planted in the parks.
And it comes from Alliant.
I'm not sure
Yes.
who the grant's from, but
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, that's been an item in the budget for as long as I can remember. We've done that. Okay. And the security cameras on 13th Street, if the police department, I thought I heard they said they really like security cameras, and I thought I heard that we're still protecting 13th Street just like we are downtown, so I don't see why that shouldn't be a budget item. And I think it's going to what we have here in town.
I can speak to that one because I'm the vice president of the Crime Stoppers of Marshall County, and I know that the sheriff's office and the police department are very high on these safety cameras. We've now got them in 3 separate places in downtown. Raycom's got them on their building. Albion is going to have a real good set of cameras up there, and most of the smaller towns around the county are very interested in investing in these cameras. You know, the Melbourne vehicles that were vandalized last weekend, they probably could have caught the person doing that if they had a camera that had traffic going in and out. But I don't think we're at a point where Crime Stoppers has decided to ask for money from the city yet. We're actually doing pretty well fundraising on our own.
Okay.
The day may come, and I think that's going to be wildly popular, actually.
We just invested a lot of money in some fuso courts and stuff on 13th Street, and I know there's some plans to upgrade it even more for public use, and if we're gonna have that much public use, I think the cameras are within line. That's it.
Okay. More public comment? Yes?
Lee Botter, 401 Orchard Drive. First of all, I want to say with Bethany, I totally agree with her. We need to be focusing on essential services. With Councilor Cahill, I agree with you. In respect to looking at the 22 projects that are out there, let's focus on a systematic approach that outlines what we need to do. I will say today I'm going to be representing Splash for Life as the co-founder. I realize it's a big ticket item there. Basically, what we were asking for and have been asking for several years is just city support. We want to go out and do the fundraising, bring the dollars in, but we do need to have a systematic approach in order to do so. And when we filled this sheet out, I felt like it lacked a lot in respect to what the Community Foundation does, what Matt does. As a city, we are not a foundation. So I would highly recommend that we focus on essential services in any process that goes out in the future make sure it's a very detailed process, and when you communicate back to these 22 organizations, be very clear as to why they're being funded or why they're not being funded. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Harley Murr, 1004 Ratcliffe Drive. I also agree with what Bethany said and from Ms. Call herself. And I just wanted to comment, when I read about the municipal band in the paper wanting more money, I hardly ever hear the band, and I think it should be run as a voluntary organization. Same with local groups, just for the benefit of the city. If these people want to do that, they should not be funded by taxpayer money, because very few taxpayers get to hear them even. We're past the time of concerts in the park and stuff. Times have changed. And then I've also, this is probably not the proper time, but I'd like to talk about the library. They're talking about expanding, which will be done basically by donated funds, the way I understand. But still, the taxpayers got to pay the upkeep and the maintenance on it, the heating and the cooling. And when the proper time comes, I'd like the council to vote no on that, because they could utilize the room they got a lot better now if they want more books and stuff there. And then the 3rd Avenue project, I went and looked at the meeting they had the other night, and I think there's a lot of bright ideas, but we need to focus on the traffic of that area, like 3rd Avenue Marion. Get the DOT to change that intersection would be more important than beautifying the drive into the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment? Let's take a vote, and it's on the motion to, oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Just a quick one. I don't know the timing on this, but we can take our vote and do whatever happens, but this whole funding thing kind of just came up a couple weeks ago, and there were no guidelines, no amount of money, nothing to guide conversations. So to me, this just ought to go away, and then fund one or two, whatever you have, find a way to fund those in the budget.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments? If not, let's take a vote on the motion to amend the motion, and the motion to amend is to fund $5,000 for the fireworks and $100 for Trees Forever.
Wasn't it 1,000 for sister? That's in
No.
them.
So call the roll, please.
Lamer,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Weirin,
No.
Cahill,
No.
Gowdy,
Yes.
Hoop.
Yes.
It passes 4-2.
Okay, that carried. And now let's vote on the amended motion that would fund those two things, as well as $1,000 for sister cities.
What are the three items here?
$100 for Trees Forever, $5,000 for the fireworks, and $1,000 for sister cities, which had requested $2,500. If there's no further discussion, let's call the roll on that motion as amended.
Weirin,
No.
Cahill,
No.
Gowdy,
No.
Hoop,
Yes.
Lamer,
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Failed for lack of majority. That's why we need another city councilor here. Thank you for the discussion, though. That was,
Is it appropriate to make a motion at this time?
it is.
I would make a motion that we, as a council, sit down and either develop a program to decide what our budget priorities are, whether they, by looking at this list and deciding if this should be something that we look at in the general fund, move it to a general fund item.
Second.
Discussion.
Are you recommending that staff get to work on this, or do you want us, you don't want us to do it personally, do you? What do you think?
If we're the ones up here making the decisions, I certainly think that we need to be invested in what.
I think we ought to give them our input on what we expect it to be, but I think that's why we have staff here to develop those things for us. So I think you've got her list, haven't you, Jessica? So you have a pretty good idea of what she thinks we ought to have in those kind of applications.
I think this would be something that I would defer to a council meeting discussion item. I would say at this point, as staff, I'm really, what we put forward was what was requested at a previous council meeting, and I think there really does need to be a larger discussion if you do want to move forward with some sort of program that has more detailed criteria, where there is a discussion of the entire group on each of those things individually as to what matters most to you, and what those priorities would be. So that would be my recommendation if this motion passes, to put it on a future discussion item
Second.
for a council meeting.
I'd second it then.
We're already seconded.
Any other questions or suggestions or discussion? I'm not sure I'm smart enough to repeat what the motion is itself, except to have a study done of what the criteria would be if we were to accept grants like this in the future. Does that characterize it well enough?
I think also taking a look at this specific list and deciding if it should be a general fund item. And I do, and I apologize that I'm not coming up with the proper words here, but I do not feel we should be a foundation item. I think we should review this list and decide if any of these should be general fund items. Does that clarify?
It does for me. Anyone have any other questions about what you're voting on if we call the roll? Let's call the roll.
Cahill,
Yes.
Gowdy,
Yes.
Hoop,
Yes.
Lamer,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Weirin.
Yes.
Carried.
I just wanted to make a comment. So the reason we're bringing it to you this time of year when we're building the budget is so we can put it in the budget and it gives us authority to spend. When you're adding things throughout the year, you know, there may be certain things that we could overspend. We really need to do a budget amendment before that. So that's why we're bringing it forward now rather than just letting you have people come forward during the year.
Thank you. Let's go to the cash flow reserve final item.
Can you flip to the projector?
There it goes.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, so we'd like to raise the reserve in the general fund. So this would just be money set aside. The policy currently says 15%, so we're just bringing this back. So if you wanted to fully fund it, you'd have to go up to the $158,000. If you don't want to fully fund it, then these are just percentages that you can take off that $158,000. So this does help our bond rating, and it does set it aside, so, you know, it won't be spent. We'd have to come back to you and ask to take it out of reserve to spend it. So is this something that you would like to consider for local option sales tax council designated?
If I may, Your Honor. The last meeting, I was reluctant to set it at the 100% based on what we were going to do with other items in the budget, but I agree that we should fund it at 100% at this time.
Thank you. Other comment? Mr. Lamer?
For as much as we go to the bond market, our bond rating is very important on the rate we're going to pay, so I don't have a problem with going to the 100%.
I see a lot of heads nodding yes. Any other discussion? This probably requires a motion. Is
I'll make a motion to fund our, increase our bond funding. No,
Cash reserve.
thank you, our cash reserve, by adding fund it 100%.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Let's roll call.
Cahill,
Yes.
Gowdy,
Yes.
Hoop,
Yes.
Lamer,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Weirin.
Yes.
Carried. Because this is a special meeting for the budget purposes, we don't have the discussion, general public discussion on the agenda, and we are adjourned at 12:55.